My dad tightened his grip on my brother's hand and walked out without a second glance. My mom held my little sister close against her chest and said softly, "Bernice, you'll be fine on your own." The front door closed, and in the silence that followed, I felt the ground vanish beneath me. I was 8 years old, and in that single moment, I understood the cruelest truth a child could ever face. I was abandoned. My name is Bernice, and now at 32, I stand as the owner of a thriving art gallery in New York City. But the road to get here was paved with betrayal and abandonment. While my brother grew up with my father and my sister was sheltered by my mother, I was left behind to survive the foster care system alone. Every day was a reminder that I was the child no one wanted. Years later, the same people who abandoned me showed up again, asking for forgiveness, expecting me to welcome them back. But they didn't realize something. The little girl they left behind no longer exists. In her place stands a woman who built her own world, and who will never let them rewrite the truth of what they did to me. Before I take you through this journey, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Hidden Family Revenge Stories so you never miss the most powerful family stories. Now, let me take you back to the very beginning, to the days that looked picture perfect, before everything came crashing down. When I look back, I sometimes wonder if those memories were real or just something I made up to survive the years that followed. Back then, before everything started to fall apart, my world seemed almost picture perfect. We lived in a modest house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. I remember the way the sun would pour through the kitchen window in the morning, lighting up the yellow curtains my mom sewed herself. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air while my dad flipped pancakes on Sundays. And Ethan, my big brother, tried to sneak chocolate chips into the batter when Dad wasn't looking. Lily, my little sister, would giggle so hard she could barely sit still, and I would feel so proud being the one in charge of setting the table. Those small routines meant everything to me. Summers were the best. Dad would pile us into the old station wagon and drive to the lake, blasting country songs from the radio. Ethan always jumped into the water first, fearless, while I hesitated at the edge until Dad encouraged me with his booming laugh. Lily clung to me, her little hands tight around my arm as if I could protect her from the waves. At night, we would stop for ice cream, and I remember the sticky sweetness running down my wrist while watching the sky turn purple and gold. It felt safe. It felt like forever. Even at home, there was magic in the little things. We had a golden retriever named Rusty who chased us in endless circles around the backyard until we collapsed in the grass, laughing so hard it hurt. My bedroom ceiling was covered with glow-in-the-dark stars, and every night I would fall asleep imagining I was drifting through galaxies. Mom used to brush Lily's curls while I sat close, waiting for my turn, and sometimes she let me brush her own hair, telling me to count 100 strokes like the princesses in storybooks. And Dad, he smelled like sawdust and mint gum. Whenever he lifted me into his arms after a long day at work, I believed nothing bad could ever happen to us. Looking back now, I realize how much I held on to those memories because they were the last moments when we were truly a family. At 8 years old, I didn't see the cracks forming. I didn't notice the stack of bills on the counter or the way my mom's smile tightened when the mail arrived. I didn't hear the fear in my father's late-night phone calls or understand why Ethan had stopped inviting his friends over. To me, life still felt whole, like our house was a fortress against the world. But under the surface, things were shifting. Dad's work as a contractor was slowing down, and money wasn't coming in the way it used to. Mom started taking extra shifts at the hospital, and the laughter that once filled our kitchen was slowly replaced by silence. At first, I thought it was temporary, just a bad week or two. The kind of grown-up problem kids aren't supposed to worry about. What I didn't know was that those cracks would widen, turning into rifts so deep that they would split our family apart. Back then, though, I still believed in the magic of Sunday pancakes and late-night giggles with my siblings. I still believed my parents loved each other and that nothing could ever separate us. I was wrong. Those memories were beautiful, but they were also the calm before the storm. The last taste of happiness before everything I knew was ripped away. The memories of warmth and laughter carried me through those early years, but soon they began to fade. It started with small changes, so subtle that at first I thought nothing of them. My dad began coming home later and later, his boots heavy on the porch long after the sun had gone down. Sometimes he would collapse into his chair with a beer in his hand, staring at the television without saying much. The smell of sawdust and mint gum that once comforted me was replaced by the bitter scent of alcohol. Mom was different too. She picked up extra shifts at the hospital, often leaving before we woke and coming back after we were already asleep. When she was home, she seemed tired all the time. Her laughter, the kind that used to shake her whole body, became rare. Instead, she wore a strained smile, the kind that told me she was holding something back. The house that once felt like a fortress suddenly seemed fragile, as if the walls themselves were listening to arguments whispered behind closed doors. I remember the first fight that made me realize something was wrong. Dad had lost a big contract, one he had promised would cover the mortgage for months. That night, their voices carried through the floorboards. Mom accused him of gambling everything on one job. Dad shouted back that he had done what he thought was best, his voice so loud it rattled my window. I hid on the stairs, clutching Rusty's collar, too scared to move. The next morning, Dad slept on the couch and breakfast was silent. Ethan pushed food around on his plate and Lily asked why Dad hadn't kissed Mom goodnight. No one answered her. As weeks passed, the tension grew. Ethan stopped bringing friends over, claiming he was too busy, but I knew he was embarrassed by the shouting. He quit his baseball team too, though he still held on to his glove, running his fingers over the worn leather when he thought no one was watching. Lily started having nightmares, waking up crying about monsters under her bed. I would climb into her bed, wrapping my arms around her until she fell asleep, even when I was too afraid to sleep myself. What hurt most was how Mom and Dad began to use us as weapons in their fights. Dad would say Ethan needed him because he was becoming a man. Mom would snap back that Lily was too young to be without her. My name was never in those arguments. I sat silently in the middle, invisible, as if I belonged to no one. I told myself it was temporary, that things would calm down, that we would go back to pancake Sundays and family trips to the lake. But the silence at dinner grew heavier. The shouting at night became more frequent, and the warmth that once filled our home slipped further away each day. Christmas that year came and went with no tree, no lights, no presents. Mom cooked a small dinner in between shifts, and we sat around the table in near silence. Lily asked when Santa was coming, and the look on Mom's face told me she didn't have the strength to answer. Dad barely touched his food, staring into his glass instead. Ethan excused himself early and shut himself in his room. I tried to smile at Lily, but even at 6 years old, she seemed to understand that magic no longer lived in our house. The fortress of love I once believed would protect us was crumbling, and no one seemed able to stop it. I held on to every small scrap of normalcy I could find, but deep down, I knew something irreversible was happening. I could feel it in the way my parents' voices cracked when they argued, in the way Ethan's shoulders slumped, in the way Lily clung to me tighter at night. Our family wasn't just struggling. It was breaking, piece by piece, and soon there would be nothing left to hold us together. The night I found the divorce papers was the night hope slipped away for good. I wasn't even looking for them. I had opened my mother's purse searching for a stick of gum, something small to ease the knot in my stomach, when I saw the heavy stack of documents with words I barely understood. Dissolution of marriage, custody arrangement, division of property. At 8 years old, I didn't need to understand the legal terms. I knew enough. This wasn't temporary. My family wasn't fixing itself. It was ending. From then on, I listened more closely. When I pretended to be asleep, I could hear my parents arguing about which child would go where, as if we were items being divided. Dad insisted Ethan would come with him because he needed a strong male influence. Mom demanded Lily stay with her because she was too young to be without her mother. I waited for my name to be spoken, for someone to say, "And Bernice will stay with me." But the words never came. They moved on to argue about money, cars, schedules, anything but me. I remember sitting on the top step of the staircase, clutching Rusty's collar, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to shout, to remind them that I was still there, still their daughter, still worth fighting for. But the fear froze me. I cried into my pillow that night so quietly that Lily, curled up beside me, wouldn't hear. She asked me if we would all live together forever, and I lied, whispering yes, even though I already knew the truth. The morning everything changed began like any other. I came downstairs to find Ethan sitting on the couch with Dad, suitcases lined up beside them. Dad told me they were going on a trip. His voice was calm, too calm, and Ethan's eyes were red from crying. When he hugged me goodbye, he whispered, "I'll call you soon, I promise." But even then, I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. I stood on the porch watching them drive away, my brother's face pressed against the car window, until the taillights disappeared. Dad didn't look back once. For days after, Mom stayed locked in her room. She barely came out to eat, her eyes hollow when she did. Lily asked again and again where Dad and Ethan had gone. I had no answers, so I made her sandwiches and read her stories until her eyelids fluttered shut. Then, one morning, Mom emerged with a hard look on her face. She moved through the house with a kind of robotic determination, folding Lily's clothes, packing her toys, zipping up bags without saying a word. I followed her into the hallway, my chest tight. "What about me?" I asked. She paused, just for a moment, then forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You'll stay here, Bernice. We'll come back for you when things settle down." I promise I didn't believe her. Not even then. Lily clung to me as Mom carried her to the car, tears streaming down her face. "Why can't Bernice come with us?" she cried, reaching for me until Mom pulled her away. "She has to stay here in case your father comes back," Mom lied, and then she closed the car door. I stood in the driveway watching them pull away, the sound of the engine fading until there was only silence again. That night, I ate cereal for dinner, the house dark except for the lamp in the corner. I left messages on my father's phone and my mother's too, begging them to come back, but no one answered. By the third day, the food was running low and I could hear Rusty whining for something more than crackers. I tried to pretend it was all an adventure, that I was strong enough to manage. But when the sun went down and the house creaked with strange noises, I curled up on the couch with all the lights on, clutching my stuffed bear, whispering to myself that someone would come. No one did. It was Mrs. Garcia, our neighbor, who finally knocked on the door and saw me standing there with empty eyes and a trembling voice. She fed me, called the authorities, and held me while I cried. My parents were gone. My siblings were gone. And at 8 years old, I was no longer a daughter or a sister. I was just another case file in the foster care system. The day I was taken from my home and placed into foster care felt like stepping into another world, one where the rules were different and the warmth of family no longer existed. At 8 years old, I carried a trash bag with a few clothes and my stuffed bear, moving from one stranger's house to another, each promising safety but delivering something else entirely. The first family was the Parkers. Their house was neat and smelled like lemon polish, but it never felt like a home. They made it clear from the start that I was there for the check the state sent every month. They gave me a small cot in the basement, next to boxes of old holiday decorations, and told me to stay out of the way. I ate alone most nights at the corner of the kitchen table, listening to them laugh with their real children in the dining room. Sometimes I tried to join in, but their glares reminded me I was just a guest, and not a welcome one. After a few months, I was moved again, this time to the Gonzalez family. Their house was loud and crowded, with too many children squeezed into too few rooms. I shared a bunk bed with two other girls, one of them older and cruel. She would steal the few belongings I had, including my stuffed bear, and laugh when I cried. I learned quickly not to complain because no one listened. The social workers smiled during their visits, asking if I was okay, but their eyes never lingered long enough to see the bruises on my arms or the way my shoulders curled in on themselves. Then came the Millers, who pretended to be kind in public but cut me down behind closed doors. Mrs. Miller had a sharp tongue, always reminding me how lucky I was to even have a bed under her roof. "No wonder your parents didn't want you," she hissed one night when I spilled a glass of milk. "You're nothing but trouble." Those words seared into me, replaying in my head whenever I tried to sleep. I started to believe her, that maybe there really was something wrong with me, something so broken my own family had seen it and walked away. But nothing compared to the Harris household. They lived on the edge of town in a rundown house that smelled of cigarettes and stale beer. At first, I thought things might be different because Mrs. Harris hugged me when I arrived. That illusion didn't last long. Within days, I was cleaning their kitchen, folding their laundry, and watching their younger kids while they went out. When I asked for food, they told me to be grateful for what I had and sent me to bed hungry. The nights were the worst. The walls were thin, and I could hear them fighting, throwing bottles, yelling curses that seeped into my dreams. I began to hide scraps of bread in my pockets, rationing them for nights when my stomach hurt too much to sleep. By the time I turned 9, I had already lived in more houses than I could count. Each time I packed my trash bag, I wondered if the next home might finally be the one where someone looked at me and saw a daughter instead of a burden. Each time I was wrong. Every move chipped away at the child I used to be, leaving me smaller, quieter, and more invisible. I started to realize that the world didn't care if I disappeared. And yet, through it all, a part of me still clung to the memory of my brother's hug, my sister's laughter, the glow-in-the-dark stars on my ceiling. Those memories became my secret treasure, the only proof that once, even for a short time, I had belonged somewhere. They were the flicker of light I carried into the darkest places, even when everything else told me I was completely alone. What made foster care unbearable wasn't just the hunger or the cold basements or the cruel words. It was the silence. The kind of silence that came from knowing no one in the world was looking for me. I used to tell myself every night that Dad would call, that Mom would show up at the door, that Ethan or Lily would run into my arms. But the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, and no one came. The phone never rang for me. The mailbox never held a letter with my name. At first, I tried to reach out. I scribbled letters to Ethan, telling him about my new schools, about how much I missed him, about the nightmares that kept me awake. I mailed them with shaky hands, praying he would write back. Weeks later, the envelopes returned unopened, stamped with words I didn't fully understand then but do now. Address not valid. I tried writing to Lily too, careful to draw little hearts and stars on the edges of the pages, hoping she would smile when she saw them. None of those letters reached her either. Eventually, I stopped writing. It hurt too much to pour my heart onto paper, only to have it thrown back at me. The hardest part was seeing other kids reunite with their families. Social workers would bring them into the office, and I'd watch from the hallway as their parents hugged them, promising to do better. I wondered what was so wrong with me that my parents couldn't do the same. I started to believe the Millers were right, that maybe I was too difficult, too unwanted, too broken. Every new placement felt less like a chance and more like proof that no one could love me for long. Nights were the loneliest. In the Harris house, I'd curl up on the thin mattress and press my stuffed bear to my chest, praying for sleep. In the Gonzalez home, I'd stay awake listening to the older girl whisper insults until I cried silently into my pillow. In the Parkers' basement, the sound of the furnace kicking on was my only company. I learned how to disappear into myself, to let my mind drift back to the glow-in-the-dark stars on my old bedroom ceiling. That imaginary sky was the only place I felt safe. I remember one night when the loneliness nearly swallowed me whole. I was 10, living with the Millers, and after another fight about spilled milk, Mrs. Miller told me I was worthless. I sat in my room staring at my reflection in the cracked mirror, asking myself if maybe she was right. If my own parents hadn't wanted me, why would anyone else? I picked up a pen and started writing on the back of an old worksheet, pouring out every thought, every fear, every ounce of hurt. That night, I began a habit that would stay with me for years, writing letters to no one, just to let the pain out. The older I grew, the more invisible I became. Teachers forgot my name. Social workers mixed up my file with others. Foster parents treated me like an extra mouth to feed. I felt like a ghost haunting houses that were never mine. By the time I turned 12, I no longer introduced myself eagerly when I was moved to a new home. I waited, silent, knowing I'd be gone soon anyway. And yet, in the middle of all that emptiness, there was still a tiny flame inside me that refused to die. It was the memory of Lily's little arms around my neck, of Ethan's laugh when we ran through the sprinkler, of my dad once lifting me into the air and making me believe I could fly. Those memories were fading, but they reminded me that I had been loved once, even if only for a short time. They kept me alive when everything else told me I was forgotten. By the time I was 12, I had almost given up on the idea that anyone could ever see me as more than a burden. Every move felt like a reminder that I didn't belong anywhere. So when a woman named Margaret showed up at the social worker's office and introduced herself as my new foster parent, I didn't expect much. She was older, with lines around her eyes and a calmness in her voice that made me wary. I kept my trash bag close to me, clutching the stuffed bear that had followed me through every house, and waited for her to tell me what rules I'd have to follow to avoid being yelled at. But Margaret was different. She didn't start with rules. She asked me what my favorite food was. She asked if I liked to draw. She even asked about my stuffed bear, and when I told her his name was Charlie, she smiled and said, "Charlie must be tired after all those moves. Let's give him a place to rest." It was such a small thing, but in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Seen. Her house wasn't big, but it was warm. She had shelves stacked with books and walls decorated with paintings she had collected from local artists. On my first night there, she made spaghetti and let me sit at the dining table with her, not off in a corner. She didn't talk much, but when she did, her words felt steady, not sharp. Later that night, she gave me clean sheets and told me the room was mine. I lay awake staring at the walls, waiting for the catch, waiting for the moment when she would remind me I didn't belong. But it never came. Margaret wasn't perfect. She was strict about school and chores, but her strictness felt different from punishment. It felt like expectation, as if she believed I was capable of more. When I brought home a drawing from school, she taped it to the fridge. When I mentioned I liked art, she handed me a sketchbook. "Fill it," she said, "and when it's full, I'll get you another." That sketchbook became my lifeline. I poured every lonely night, every broken memory, every unspoken word onto those pages. For the first time, my pain created something beautiful. At school, things started to shift too. My art teacher, Mrs. Rivera, noticed the sketches I was making and told me I had talent. She encouraged me to enter a local art contest. I didn't believe I could win, but Margaret insisted I try. When my drawing of a girl standing alone under a starry sky won second place, I felt a spark inside me. People were clapping for me not because they had to, but because they saw something worth applauding. For a while, life felt almost normal. Margaret attended my school events, cheered when I got good grades, and reminded me to eat breakfast before rushing out the door. She wasn't my mother, but she cared in a way that felt real. I started to imagine a future where maybe I could become an artist, where maybe I could build a life that wasn't defined by rejection. But just as I began to believe in that possibility, life reminded me how fragile hope could be. One evening, Margaret sat me down at the kitchen table, her hands folded tightly together. She told me she had been diagnosed with cancer. The words hit me harder than any cruel remark ever had. I wanted to scream that it wasn't fair, that I couldn't lose the only person who had ever truly cared for me. But all I could do was sit there, silent, as tears blurred the sketchbook in front of me. When Margaret passed away a year later, I was placed back into the system. The loss cut deep, but this time something was different. She had given me more than a roof or food. She had given me proof that I could be worth loving, proof that I had a voice, and proof that I could create something beautiful from my pain. That belief stayed with me even as I packed my trash bag once again. Turning 18 was supposed to mean freedom, but for me it felt more like being pushed off a cliff without a parachute. The day I aged out of the foster system, my social worker handed me a folder with some papers, a list of shelters, and a bus pass. She patted me on the shoulder like she was saying goodbye to a coworker she barely knew. Then she walked away, and I was on my own. No parents to call, no relatives to lean on, no family to celebrate with. Just me and a trash bag of belongings, standing in the middle of a city that didn't care if I survived or not. I rented a tiny room above a laundromat, just big enough for a twin mattress and a cracked dresser. The wallpaper peeled, the radiator clanged in the middle of the night, and the smell of detergent seeped through the floorboards. Still, it was the first space that was mine, even if I could barely afford it. I worked 2 jobs to keep it, bussing tables at a diner during the day and cleaning offices late into the night. Sometimes I'd fall asleep on the bus, jerking awake just in time to drag myself to class at the community college I scraped enough money together to attend. Money was always the enemy. There were days I skipped meals so I could pay rent. Nights I wore the same shoes with holes in the soles because I couldn't afford new ones. I learned to count every coin, to stretch a bag of rice and a carton of eggs into a week's worth of meals. I stopped looking in store windows because the sight of things I couldn't have only deepened the pit in my stomach. The hardest part wasn't the hunger or the exhaustion. It was the constant fear that one small mistake, a late payment, a missed shift, a bad grade, would send my entire fragile world crashing down. And yet, in the middle of all that struggle, there were moments that kept me moving forward. One of them was art. Margaret had given me my first sketchbook, and even after she died, I carried it with me everywhere. On my breaks at the diner, I would sit in the corner booth and sketch customers, capturing the slump of tired shoulders or the way someone's eyes softened when they smiled. Late at night, when the office floors gleamed and the world was quiet, I would pull out my pencil and draw until my hand cramped. Art became my therapy, my way of processing all the pain I didn't have words for. Still, there were times when the weight of everything nearly crushed me. I remember one winter when the heat in my apartment broke. I layered on every sweater I owned, wrapped myself in thin blankets, and still shivered until my teeth ached. I cried into my pillow, wondering if this was all my life would ever be. Was I doomed to keep struggling forever, invisible and unwanted, just like in the foster homes? But then I'd remember Margaret's voice, steady and firm, telling me to fill my sketchbook, telling me I was capable of more. That memory became my anchor. At school, things weren't easier. I kept my head down, afraid people would see right through me. When classmates talked about their parents paying tuition or sending them care packages, I pretended to be too busy to join in. I couldn't relate to their world, and I didn't want to explain mine. But every so often, a professor would notice my drawings in the margins of my notes. One in particular, Dr. Harris pulled me aside after class and told me I had talent worth nurturing. I wanted to believe him, but doubt clung to me like a shadow. I nodded politely, tucked my sketchbook back into my bag, and went off to my night shift, too tired to think about dreams. Looking back, those early years on my own were brutal. Every day was a fight to survive. Every night a battle with the memories that haunted me. But in the middle of that struggle, something else was forming: resilience. Each bill I paid, each class I passed, each sketch I finished was proof that I could keep going, even when everything in me screamed to give up. I didn't realize it then, but those years were laying the foundation for the person I would become. The girl who had once been abandoned was slowly, painfully turning into a woman who refused to be broken. Even as I learned how to keep myself alive, I couldn't escape the shadows of my past. The foster homes had left scars, but nothing cut deeper than the silence of my own family. I carried their absence like a weight on my shoulders, and no matter how much progress I made, I couldn't shake the question that haunted me every single day. Why wasn't I enough for them to stay? At night, after long shifts at the diner or cleaning offices, I would come back to my small apartment and sit on the floor with my sketchbook. I drew until my hand cramped, but the images that poured out were always the same. A little girl standing in a doorway, reaching for someone who was walking away. A child sitting on the steps of a dark house, clutching a stuffed bear. A family gathered around a table with one chair left empty. Each page was a confession I couldn't say out loud. A reminder that no matter how far I'd come, the abandoned child inside me was still screaming to be heard. There were moments when I tried to bury those feelings. I told myself that I was strong now, that I didn't need anyone, that I was better off without the people who left me behind. And sometimes I believed it. When I got a good grade on a paper or finished a drawing I was proud of, I felt powerful, like I was proving them all wrong. But then I'd hear a father call for his daughter at the diner, or see a mother hug her child outside of school, and the bitterness would rise in my throat. It was like being torn in two. Half of me desperate to forget, the other half desperate to be remembered. The hardest part was learning how to trust. Margaret had given me a glimpse of what love could feel like, but losing her had taught me that even the good people could vanish. So when new people came into my life, I kept them at arm's length. Friends invited me to parties, but I usually made excuses. Professors encouraged me to pursue art seriously, but I was afraid to hope too much. Hope, in my experience, always came with loss. If I expected nothing, then maybe I couldn't be hurt again. Still, the loneliness gnawed at me. I wanted connection. I wanted to believe that I was worth staying for. There were nights I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker, imagining what Ethan or Lily were doing at that moment. Were they happy? Did they think of me at all? I remembered Ethan's promise to call, Lily's tiny hands reaching for me, and I wondered if those memories mattered only to me. Sometimes I picked up the phone, dialed the old numbers I had memorized, only to hear that cold, mechanical voice telling me the line was disconnected. Each click of the receiver was another reminder that I was alone. But even as the pain consumed me, something inside refused to let go completely. That stubborn part of me clung to Margaret's belief that I was capable of more. I began to write letters to myself, the way I once wrote to Ethan and Lily. "You're not worthless. I scribbled on scraps of paper. "You're not invisible." I taped those notes to the walls of my apartment, surrounding myself with words I couldn't yet believe but desperately needed to hear. Art became my rebellion against the silence. With every sketch, I reclaimed a piece of the voice that had been stolen from me. My professors noticed, pushing me to enter more contests, to showcase my work. At first, I resisted, terrified of rejection. But slowly, I began to realize that even if no one else saw my worth, I could create something undeniable, something that proved I existed. The battle inside me never went away. I lived every day torn between the child who wanted her family back and the woman who swore she didn't need them. That tension was exhausting, but it also fueled me. It pushed me to keep working, to keep creating, to keep proving that I was still here. And little by little, that determination started to change the course of my life. As my drawings grew bolder and my professors encouraged me more, I started to imagine a different future for myself. Dr. Harris, the professor who first noticed my sketches, pushed me to apply for scholarships I never thought I could win. With his help and my stubborn determination, I transferred from community college to a state university, a place that felt like another world compared to the laundromat apartment I had been living in. But stepping into that new world also meant stepping into a minefield of judgments and assumptions. My classmates came from families that could pay tuition without blinking, kids who drove to class in cars their parents bought them, who talked casually about summer trips to Europe or internships set up by family connections. I tried to blend in, but the differences were impossible to hide. My clothes were secondhand, my textbooks always borrowed, and while they spent weekends partying, I spent mine working shifts to cover rent and food. At first, some classmates tried to be friendly. They invited me out, asked about my background, and I answered carefully, never mentioning foster care. I told myself it was safer that way. But secrets have a way of slipping out. One afternoon during a critique session, a girl named Amanda sneered when she heard me mention my part-time job. "Of course you work all the time," she said loudly. "That's what happens when you don't have real parents to help you." The room went silent. My cheeks burned, and though I tried to laugh it off, the words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. Moments like that became more frequent. People didn't always say it outright, but I could feel it in their stares, in the way conversations shifted when I walked into the room. I wasn't one of them. I was the girl from foster care, the girl who didn't belong. For a while, I let their words sink into me like poison, confirming the doubts that already lived inside my head. But then I would go back to my apartment, open my sketchbook, and pour every ounce of that humiliation onto the page. My anger turned into bold lines, my shame into vivid colors. Slowly, my pain became art that people couldn't ignore. Outside of school, the struggle didn't ease. At the diner where I still worked, customers sometimes treated me like I was invisible. They snapped their fingers for service, left messes without a thought, and tipped me with spare change. More than once, someone asked what I wanted to do with my life, and when I told them I was studying art, they smirked. "Good luck with that," they'd say, as if my dream was a joke. Each comment felt like a stone thrown at the fragile foundation I was trying to build. Yet in the middle of all this, I found people who believed in me. Madison, a classmate who later became my best friend, saw beyond the surface. She didn't flinch when I finally told her about foster care. Instead, she hugged me and said, "That just makes you stronger." For the first time, I had someone who wanted to sit with me in the quiet moments, who brought me coffee before exams, who reminded me I wasn't as alone as I thought. There was also James, a boy from one of my art classes who shared his paints with me when I couldn't afford my own. He admired my work, not out of pity, but because he genuinely respected it. His attention scared me at first. Love, in my experience, always came with loss. But he was patient, gentle, and slowly I let my guard down. Even with these bright spots, the tension never disappeared. Every accomplishment I earned was shadowed by whispers of where I came from. Every step forward met with reminders of what I lacked. I lived in constant conflict, torn between the validation I was finally receiving and the prejudice that told me I would never measure up. But those years, as harsh as they were, forced me to make a choice. I could let the world's cruelty define me, or I could carve out my own place in it. Each cruel remark became another reason to keep going. Each door slammed in my face fueled the fire to prove I deserved to stand where I was. And with every drawing, every exhibition, every late night spent perfecting my craft, I felt myself rising above the weight of their doubt. By the time I was 28, I had built a life that looked nothing like the one I came from. My gallery was small but thriving, a place where young artists could display their work and where people from the city wandered in on weekends to admire pieces that told stories of struggle and resilience. I had an apartment that smelled like paint and coffee, a circle of friends who felt like family, and for the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. But just when I thought I had left the past behind, it came knocking. Literally. It started with a Facebook message from a name I hadn't seen in years. Ethan, my brother. My heart stopped the moment I saw it, the same way it used to when I waited for his letters that never came. His words were short, awkward, almost apologetic. Hey, Bernice, it's been a long time. I'd really like to talk. Dad's not doing well. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, my hands trembling. I wanted to delete the message, to pretend I never saw it. But I couldn't stop reading those words again and again. Dad's not doing well. After all these years of silence, of abandonment, of pretending I didn't exist, now he wanted me back because he was sick. For days, I ignored the message, but it lingered in my mind like a shadow. Memories of Ethan flooded back. His laugh when we chased Rusty in the yard, the way he whispered, "I'll call you soon," before Dad drove away. The promise he never kept. The betrayal of pretending I didn't exist when we crossed paths years later at his baseball game. Part of me longed to hear his voice, to believe he was reaching out because he missed me. Another part wanted to slam the door in his face the way he had once slammed it in mine. Before I could decide, another message appeared, this time from Lily, my baby sister. Her words were different. Gentler, desperate. "Bernice, I've been looking for you for so long. I thought Mom told you about us, but she lied. I want to see you. Please don't shut me out." Reading her message felt like being punched in the chest. I could hear her small voice in my head, crying out as Mom pulled her away from me, begging to know why I couldn't come with them. I imagined the little girl who once clung to my hand, now a grown woman reaching for me again. My eyes filled with tears before I could stop them. But with those tears came rage. Why now? Why after decades of silence? After birthdays missed? After every Christmas I spent alone? After every night I cried myself to sleep believing no one cared? Why now, when I had finally built a life without them? I tried to bury myself in work, filling the gallery schedule, organizing exhibits, sketching late into the night. But no matter how busy I stayed, the past bled through. I would see a family walking into the gallery together and feel a lump in my throat. I would hear Lily's words echoing in my head, pleading with me not to shut her out. And every time I saw Ethan's message, my anger and longing twisted tighter, like barbed wire around my heart. One evening, as I was closing the gallery, the bell over the door rang. I turned around, and there he was. Ethan. Older, broader, his hair flecked with gray, but his eyes still familiar. He didn't smile, just looked at me like he wasn't sure if I'd throw him out. "Bernice," he said quietly, My name in his voice was like hearing it for the first time in decades. I froze. 1,000 emotions crashed into me at once: grief, fury, relief, fear. Part of me wanted to run into his arms, to believe I still had a brother. Another part wanted to scream at him until my throat gave out. All I managed to say was, "You don't get to be here." But he didn't leave. He told me Dad was sick, that Mom had been trying to find me too, that Lily cried when she realized how much time we had lost. I wanted to stop listening, but his words pierced through the armor I had spent years building. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the messages on my phone, replaying the sound of Ethan's voice. My world, which I thought was finally steady, was shaking again. The family I had spent years trying to forget was clawing its way back into my life. And I knew deep down that I couldn't ignore them forever. The first time I agreed to meet them, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Ethan had called me again and again after showing up at the gallery, his voice low and urgent, begging me to see Dad before it was too late. Against my better judgment, I finally said yes. Not for him, not for Dad, but because a part of me needed answers I had carried like stones in my chest for more than 20 years. We met at a quiet restaurant on the edge of town. The drive there felt endless, every mile pulling me closer to the ghosts I had tried to outrun. When I walked in, my eyes landed on them instantly. Ethan was at the table, older but still carrying the same weight in his shoulders I remembered from our childhood. Beside him was Lily, no longer the little girl clutching my hand, but a young woman with tears brimming in her eyes the second she saw me. And then, across from them, sat Richard and Carolyn, my father and mother. For a moment, time stopped. I couldn't breathe. My father's hair was white now, his skin weathered, his frame thinner than I remembered. He looked smaller somehow, fragile even, but when his eyes met mine, there was still a flicker of pride and stubbornness. My mother's face was lined with age, her hands clutching a tissue, trembling as if she'd been waiting for this moment for decades. "Bernice," my mother whispered, her voice cracking. "You came." I stood frozen at the edge of the table, unsure if I should run or scream or collapse into tears. Every instinct screamed at me to protect myself, to remember the empty nights and unanswered letters. But Lily rose from her chair and wrapped her arms around me before I could move. She smelled like lavender shampoo, and for a moment I saw the little girl I used to tuck into bed. My arms moved on their own, holding her tight, both of us crying silently into each other's shoulders. When we finally sat down, the silence was suffocating. No one seemed to know how to begin. My father cleared his throat, his voice hoarse. "You look successful," he said, as if commenting on a stranger. "I'm proud of what you've made of yourself." Proud. The word hit me like a slap. Proud of what I made of myself? Where was that pride when I was 8 years old, shivering in an empty house with no one to feed me? Where was it when I begged for someone to come back? My hands clenched in my lap, but I forced myself to stay quiet. My mother reached across the table, her eyes pleading. "I never stopped thinking about you," she said. "Not a single day went by that I didn't wonder how you were." The anger that had been simmering inside me for years threatened to spill over. "Then why didn't you come back?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why didn't you call or write or do anything to show me I mattered?" Tears spilled down her cheeks and she shook her head. "I was sick, Bernice. Depressed. I couldn't handle losing the family, and I thought you would be okay. You were always the strong one," I almost laughed. Strong? I had been a child, begging for someone to notice me, to choose me. Strength wasn't what carried me through those years. It was desperation. Lily placed her hand on mine, her eyes desperate. Please don't hate us, Bernice. I wanted you. I swear I did. I asked for you, but Mom said you had gone to live with Grandma. I didn't know the truth until years later. Her words cut through me, both a balm and a new wound. She hadn't abandoned me. She had been lied to. For the first time, the wall I had built around my heart cracked just a little. My father leaned forward, his hands shaking. I know I failed you, he admitted, his voice low. But I was doing what I thought was best. Ethan needed me. Lily needed her mother. I didn't think you— He stopped himself, but the damage was already done. He didn't think I needed anyone. I swallowed hard, my chest burning with 1,000 unsaid words. All the memories came rushing back. The empty kitchen, the letters returned, the cold nights in strange beds. And now here they were, across the table, asking for something they had never given me. That dinner was not a reunion. It was a battlefield. Every glance, every word was a clash between the child I had been and the woman I had become. And as I sat there, staring at the people who had once been my whole world, I realized this meeting wasn't about what they wanted. It was about what I was finally ready to say. The silence after my father's unfinished sentence was deafening. I stared at him, the man who once lifted me high into the air and made me believe I could fly. The same man who had walked out with my brother and never looked back. My chest tightened as I waited for him to finish what we both already knew. He didn't think I needed anyone. He thought I was expendable. I leaned forward, my voice sharp even though it shook. You didn't think I needed anyone? I was 8 years old. I didn't need to be strong. I needed a father who wouldn't walk away. My mother sobbed into her tissue, shaking her head. I told myself you would survive, Bernice. You always seemed tougher than the others. I thought I couldn't take care of 3 children on my own, and I told myself you'd be okay. I felt the heat rise in my face. I wasn't okay. Do you know what it's like to wake up in an empty house with no food? Do you know what it's like to wait by the window every night hoping someone will come back, only to realize no one is coming? Do you know how many times I wrote letters to Ethan and Lily that never got answered? Do you know what it feels like to be passed around from house to house, treated like trash, told over and over that no one wanted me? My words hung in the air like a storm. Ethan lowered his eyes, guilt etched into every line of his face. I knew, Bernice. He whispered, I saw you once at that baseball game. I pretended I didn't know you because I was scared of Dad. I should have said something. I should have fought for you. I'm sorry, his apology stung more than his silence ever had. I remembered that day, standing just yards away from him, waiting for a sign, any sign, that he remembered me. And he had chosen to look away. My mother reached for me again, her hands trembling. I was sick, she repeated. I couldn't think straight. I thought I was protecting Lily. I thought you'd find your way. I regret it every day of my life. I pulled my hand back, my voice rising. Regret doesn't erase the years I lost. Regret doesn't erase the nights I went to bed hungry or the times I was told I was worthless. Regret doesn't erase the fact that I begged for you and you never came. For the first time, my father's eyes filled with tears. He pressed his hands to the table, his voice breaking. I failed you. I failed all of you. But you were the one I thought could make it without me. And you did. Look at you now, I let out a bitter laugh. Don't you dare take credit for who I am. Everything I built in spite of you. Every success I've had came from the pain you left me with. You don't get to sit here and say you're proud as if you had anything to do with it. The table fell silent again, heavy with everything that had been unsaid for 2 decades. Lily's tears streamed down her face as she gripped my arm. "Please, Bernice," she pleaded. "Don't let this be the end. We can't change the past, but maybe we can change now." Her words softened something inside me, but the anger still roared. I looked around the table at the faces of the people who had defined both my deepest wounds and my strongest will to survive. They were confessing, they were begging, they were drowning in guilt, but none of it could rewrite the truth. I had been abandoned. I had been left behind. And no apology could ever give me back the childhood they stole. That dinner was not about forgiveness. It was about truth. And for the first time, I spoke mine without fear. You left me. You broke me. And now you want me to pretend it never happened. But I won't. I refuse to carry your excuses on my back anymore. That burden is yours, not mine. Their faces crumbled under the weight of my words. For years I had been silent, invisible, forgotten. But in that moment, I wasn't the little girl waiting at the window anymore. I was the woman who had survived. And I wasn't afraid to make them face what they had done. After my words settled into the silence, no one at the table moved. My father looked down at his hands. My mother dabbed at her tears, and Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Lily was the only one still holding on to me, her grip tight as though she feared I might disappear again. For years I had dreamed of this moment, imagined what I would say if I ever saw them face to face. And now that it was happening, the weight of it pressed down on me like a storm cloud ready to break. My mother tried again, her voice trembling. "We can start over, Bernice. We can have family dinners, birthdays, holidays together. We can be whole again." The words struck me as painfully naive. Whole. There was no whole to return to. That version of us had shattered a long time ago. I shook my head slowly. You can't erase what happened by pretending we're a happy family again. I'm not here to play house. I'm here because I needed to say out loud what you did to me. And now you've heard it. Ethan leaned forward, desperation in his eyes. "Please, Bernice. I know I didn't stand up for you when I should have, but I don't want to lose you again. I've lived with that guilt for years. Give me a chance to make it right." His voice cracked, and for the first time, I believed his remorse was real. But the ache inside me reminded me that guilt doesn't heal the scars of abandonment. "You had your chance when you saw me at that baseball game," I whispered. "You could have said something then. Instead, you chose silence. That silence shaped who I became. And now you want me to forget it ever happened. I can't." Lily's tears spilled freely as she clutched my arm. "I don't care about the past anymore. I just want my sister. I want to know you now, not just the memory of you." Her plea cracked something deep inside me. I saw the little girl who had begged to know why I couldn't come with her all those years ago. She hadn't abandoned me. She had been taken from me just as I had been left behind. But even that love couldn't erase the truth. I pulled her into a hug, kissed the top of her head, and whispered, "I love you, Lily. I always have. But love doesn't mean I can go back to being that little girl waiting at the window. I'm not her anymore." My father finally looked up, his eyes red. "Then what do you want from us?" I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. "Respect. Honesty. If you want to be in my life, it has to be on my terms. I won't come to forced family reunions. I won't sit around a table pretending we were never broken. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be real. And it has to start with you acknowledging who I am now. Not the child you left, but the woman I became without you." The air grew heavy with my declaration. My mother covered her face with her hands, sobbing harder. Ethan reached across the table, but I didn't take his hand. I couldn't. Not yet. Lily nodded, wiping her tears as if she understood in a way the others never could. Leaving that restaurant, I felt a strange calm wash over me. For the first time, I hadn't just carried the weight of my past. I had laid it down in front of the very people who had given it to me. And though they wanted to pull me back into the illusion of a family that never truly existed, I had drawn a line they could not cross. That night, as I walked back into my apartment, the city lights glowing outside my window, I realized I had finally claimed something I had been denied my entire life: choice. They could no longer decide for me whether I was wanted or not. I had set the boundary, and this time, I was the one in control. In the weeks after that dinner, my phone buzzed with messages I wasn't sure I wanted to read. My mother wrote long paragraphs filled with apologies, some so desperate they bordered on begging. My father's notes were shorter, clipped, as if he didn't know how to string words together without his pride getting in the way. Ethan called more than once, leaving voicemails where his voice cracked with guilt. And Lily sent me photos of the sky, of her coffee cups, of little details from her life with captions like, "This made me think of you." I didn't respond right away. I let the words sit there, proof that I finally had the power they once held over me. For years, I had been the one reaching out, writing letters that came back unopened, waiting for calls that never came. Now it was them who waited, and me who decided. That shift in control was my revenge. Not loud or cruel, but steady and undeniable. Still, I couldn't ignore Lily. She was the only one who had never truly abandoned me, even if she had been misled. We began to meet for coffee, cautiously at first, like strangers trying to rediscover a bond stolen from us. She told me about her struggles, about how she had spent years wondering why her big sister had disappeared, about the anger she felt when she learned the truth. And slowly, I let her back in. We laughed, we cried, and for the first time in decades, I felt like I had a piece of family that didn't come with conditions. With my parents, things were different. I agreed to meet them individually, not as a family. With my father, the conversations were stiff. He was a man weighed down by his mistakes, his health failing, but still clinging to the belief that his choices had been reasonable. I listened, but I didn't forgive. Not yet. With my mother, the tears flowed easily, her words spilling out in tangled apologies. I told her I heard her, but I also told her forgiveness wasn't a gift I could hand out like candy. If she wanted a place in my life, it would take time and consistency, not just sorrow. The truth was, I no longer needed them. I wasn't the child begging for love at the window anymore. I had built my own life, brick by brick, scar by scar. My gallery was thriving. I had friends who showed up when I needed them, a partner who loved me without conditions, and a community that valued what I created. That was my family now. The little girl they abandoned had grown into a woman who didn't just survive. She conquered. One evening, standing in my gallery after everyone had left, I hung two pieces side by side. The first was a drawing I had made years ago in the foster home. A little girl standing under a night sky, clutching a stuffed bear, her eyes wide with loneliness. The second was a self-portrait I had finished recently. Me, 32, strong and unflinching, my gaze steady, my scars visible but worn like armor. Together, they told my story better than any words ever could. When my parents eventually visited the gallery, they stopped in front of those drawings. My mother covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming silently. My father stood still, his shoulders slumped, the weight of recognition finally breaking through his pride. They didn't say a word, and they didn't need to. They knew. That was my revenge. Not in shouting or punishing, but in showing them exactly what they had lost. As I turned off the gallery lights that night, I felt something settle in me. Not forgiveness, Not yet, but freedom. I wasn't carrying their choices anymore. They belonged to them, not me. My life was mine, built from the ashes they left behind. So, when people ask me about family, I tell them this: blood is not a guarantee of love. Family is the people who stay, the people who fight for you, the people who never let you stand alone. That truth is my victory. That truth is my final revenge. Looking back on everything, I've learned that sometimes the people who should protect us are the very ones who cause the deepest wounds. But those wounds don't have to define us. They can shape us, yes, but they don't decide our worth. I was abandoned, forgotten, and left behind, but I built a life that no one can take away from me. My scars became my strength, and my silence turned into a voice that cannot be ignored. The lesson I carry is simple but powerful. Family isn't just blood. Family is the people who stand by you when the world falls apart. It's the ones who choose you every single day, not just when it's convenient. And sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't anger or hate. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be. If you've ever felt invisible, unwanted, or abandoned, I want you to know this: you are not alone, and you are not broken. Your story can still be rewritten, not by the people who left you, but by the person you choose to become. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you in any way, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Hidden Family Revenge Stories so you never miss the most powerful stories of resilience, justice, and transformation. Until next time, remember this: your pain does not define you. Your strength does. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.